Dr. Martinez will talk to us about, she had her PhD awarded in 1991, and I have the title here, Idealism Encounters the System, Personal, Institutional and Social Constructions of Beginning Teachers. Kay comes to us with a myriad of experience working at all levels with children in school settings, with students in the academic environment, and is a member of many professional associations and has also been published widely nationally and internationally. I believe you're in for a treat. Yesterday morning was the first time I'd actually heard Kay lecture, and I walked away after 2.5 hours thinking, wow, this woman is very grounded and is able to translate what we need to hear. And is, I guess, when I walked away last night, I was thinking, and she reminded me a little bit about one of those quotes from Abraham Lincoln. And the quote was, "The surest way to reveal one's character is not through adversity, but by giving them power." And one of the big gifts I think that Kay gave us yesterday, and I think she'll give you tonight, is that gift of empowerment. So I'd like you to join with me and to welcome Kay.
I'll just check we've got sound operating. Thank you, that's terrific, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. It really is a treat to be here. It's always a bit daunting when you hear somebody give you your life in 2 minutes like that. It's a bit scary. So I hope I'm going to live up to that as we go. I just want to show you what I plan to do tonight. Oh, sorry. Bear with me. So these were the sorts of things that I thought that I would try to cover in this session. I hope it matches what you thought you were going to get, and I hope together we'll be able to explore some of these concepts as we go. So it's not going to be me standing talking at you the whole time. You'll be relieved to know, although at the end of a long day, maybe you'd just be happy to sit there and be entertained. So thank you for coming along, as I said, at the end of a very long day. I guess when I started to think about this question of what is a good teacher, I was struck to go back in time and think of it through time as to who the first teachers were that we might have known about. And I was struck, I think, by, for me, these big three stood out as sort of three wise men. And I think the men part is a bit interesting too, even looking at the group of people we've got here tonight. A lot of the work that's been done about the good teacher, the outstanding teacher, the hero teacher, has almost always been about the man. And we know that we work in a highly feminised profession as teachers. So it's an interesting little paradox that we explore as we go through this. So this is a very old question. What makes a good teacher? And as we go through, I'll be throwing some ideas at you, some of which might resonate with you, others of which you might think, well, yeah, it doesn't work for me. So please keep that in mind as we go. We're working on this together. And then I thought, this is such a big question, how can I possibly answer it when the notions of what's a good teacher vary so extraordinarily across time and across place and culture. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in our heads. And as I looked at what a typical classroom was like only a little over 100 years ago in that top photo, I thought how extraordinary that we've come so far. And what I've tried to do in the bottom right one is show the sort of example of what we're thinking about good teachers might be doing. You know, it's almost a case of pick the teacher in that case, in the one at the bottom. And the one on the left, I think, was a really salutary reminder about the notion of what's a good teacher is very much a question of the economic and cultural and social context in which we work as teachers. Speaking of which, I'm very conscious that I'm an outsider to the Singapore context, and those, I think all of you here have been here for at least some time longer than me certainly. So I hope that the things that I say are in no way offensive to you, and I hope you'll correct me if I get it wrong for what a good teacher is in the Singapore context. I'm very, very conscious of that, and certainly would not want to offend anybody with the things I say. Can I just check, is this sound working okay for you? You're all comfortable with it? Great, thank you. All right, I thought what was important, as we're going to have a couple of hours here together, that we did get to know just a little bit about who we are, and Margaret's given you the official version. And I should say that this is a very exciting day for James Cook University. Some of you may have seen the article in the Straits Times I say that right? Straits Times, is that what it's called? In the paper this morning that James Cook University here in Singapore, up until today, has been like a half sister for those of us working on the campus in Townsville and Cairns in Queensland. As of today, James Cook University is now a full sister. We are now 3 equal campuses working as James Cook University in the tropics. So that's a pretty exciting day for us. And I want to just take this opportunity to publicly congratulate Margaret and her colleagues for the idea of setting up these public talks. I think it's wonderful to grow a community of scholarship around who we are as teachers in whatever context we teach. I think often as teachers we're seen as fairly low in the status of professions, and this sort of work I think helps affirm ourselves and also create that sense of the collective being, that being a teacher is really a highly, highly noble profession, I think. So congratulations, Margaret, it's been a great initiative. Yes, John is a teacher student. And it's lovely of you to come and support that, because communities can only grow if we all are in there together. So that's a terrific amount of goodwill in the room. Thank you for that. I hit on the idea of calling this a cook's tour, because one of my passions in life is food and cooking, and it's one of the other reasons I love coming to Singapore, apart from always finding really lovely people to work with up here. I love the food in Singapore, it's just fantastic. So I thought this is really, I can be very clever here, because I always thought in my head, are you familiar with the expression a cook's tour? And in my head I'd always thought it was sort of like, it was a smorgasbord, like a cook. So I was going to make these clever analogies that being a good teacher is a bit like a sophisticated souffle where you measure all the ingredients and get it just right and cook it to a turn and there it is for you. Or on the other hand, it's instant noodles, you know, you throw it into the deep boiling water and see what happens. But when I looked, a cook's tour actually refers to Thomas Cook, who's now the great travel show owner, the travel company owner, who in 1889 to 92 developed this thing about a cook's tour. It was a tour of the leading places. So that took me up a bit of a blind alley. So it is still going to be a bit of a smorgasbord that I throw at you, and hopefully you'll pick things out. So just a quick bit, as I say, Margaret gave you the official story. I want to work backwards. This has been a very important part of my life in the last year. I've had my first grandchild born in London, and this is Harry. And I thought what was interesting when we're looking at a good teacher is I think his parents are doing a wonderful job of teaching him how to eat. So this is a very hands-on experience. This is active learning at its best. So teaching in all these contexts, I think, is really critical. So working backwards from there, this was me as the teacher educator, laying myself figuratively at the feet of my student teachers. This was work that I dearly loved, working as a teacher educator with them. Since I stopped doing that, you can see I've aged quite a lot, so that obviously kept me young. But since then I've moved into the area of higher education, which has taken me into the literature of what it is to be a good teacher in a university context. And a lot of the work I've done has been around academic professional development, of working with academic staff across a huge range of disciplines, and that's been pretty exciting too. I think for all of us it's really important as teachers to get out of our comfort zone. I had a dear colleague in the States who was a drama teacher, and he used to talk about the risk of staying in your groove. And I think, yeah, that's exactly the risk we run, isn't it? If you've been teaching for a long time, at the same level, in the same context, you do make a bit of a groove. And it is important, I think, to refresh ourselves as we go. So I think when I work backwards again, another part of my life that was very important was working as a mother with 2 beautiful daughters who taught me a very different sense of the child, of the learner. And this was the 24-hour-a-day bit, that when you're a teacher and you pop in and you pop out and the children pop in and out of your life, that's terrific. But being a mum taught me something else again about what it is to be a good teacher, about the preciousness of each of these children who comes before you that I probably hadn't properly worked out before. And in secondary teaching, the work that I did was, I just really loved. I loved the excitement of adolescents, the fact that they're between places, they're on the way to somewhere else, that I really loved the challenges that were associated with that. So that's sort of me in a quick nutshell in a different context that I taught in. Also when I was in Mum, I've always been a bit of a groupie, so I became involved in childbirth and parenthood education. So again, teaching in that context taught me some other things as well. So you've got a sense of who I am. Let me get a quick sense of who you are. Can I assume you are all teachers? Is there someone in the room who's not a teacher? Okay. Can I ask your interest in coming along tonight then?
Yeah. Yes. I actually work with teachers in the school. I'm a school counsellor.
Well,
yes.
Thank you. Yes, I think we consider you to sort of be part of our membership in many ways. But it's interesting, I'm sure you will have interesting insights and concepts because you'll hear from the children very different views about who we are as teachers too, I think. So that's useful. Let me see if you are teachers of early childhood. Would you put your hands up, please? Lots of you are experts in the most difficult, I think, the most difficult teaching. Primary school? Secondary? Oh, tertiary? Okay. Hands up if you've been teaching for more than 5 years. Lots of experience, lots of expertise in the room. Hands up if this is your first year of teaching. Great. You're at the beginning of a wonderful journey. Hands up if you're a good teacher. Oh, some hesitation about that. Isn't that interesting? We'll come back to that question. Hold that thought. I talked about this with a group of people yesterday, and I think the answer for me would be, after 40-something years of teaching, am I a good teacher? Yes, on a good day, I think is probably what I would say. You know. And then, of course, the question of really the crux of what I want to do in this time together is to talk about how you know if you're a good teacher. What is a good teacher? How do you know if what you're doing is good? Is really the crux of, I think, what we want to talk about. And just before we go on, what I'm going to do is, as I showed you in the session, I've got a couple of little film clips to look at. I've got some key questions. I'm going to dip into the literature and have a look at that. And I just wanted to, as I reflected on this, I thought about the fact that my first ever teaching that I did was when I was 4. So as a 4-year-old, I was going to the back garden at our house, at a little tiny village in North Queensland. And for me, the concept of a good teacher, so how do I know what a teacher is before I've even been in a school, right? But the concept that I had certainly involved a stick. So I used to have this stick and I would hit things. It was very much my idea of what a teacher was. So the question I want to ask you, that I want to pose to you now, and there'll be several of these questions, is this one. Are teachers born? Teachers are born, not made. Will you just talk to the people around you for just a couple of minutes, maybe just the person beside you, and have a talk about whether you think teachers are born, not made. Take a couple of minutes. In your discussion, thought that teachers... Denise, want to talk about that a bit?
Well, I think that some people are very much born teachers, but not everybody is. And even those who are born teachers can be made better.
Okay, right. Any other comments? People want to add something?
Dr. Margaret, that yeah, I believe teachers are born, not made, because the teachers actually are born the moment a child pops up a question and asks something. And I'm sure you want to give an answer to this person, and you don't have to be a trained teacher to give an answer. You actually already, you start your life as a teacher yourself. Okay. And I was sharing with Margaret that although initially I did sign up as a teacher when I was very young, and I was called up for national service in Singapore, and I found the army more interesting, and I stayed in the army and became a teacher in the army, all the way up to military college in London. So I've been, to some extent, I have been teaching, although I've never had any formal training as a teacher.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So it's a real, for me, I still puzzle on it. And as a teacher, educator, you can imagine that it is something that I've thought a lot about. I think about the issue of selection and recruitment of teachers. How should we select then the people that we bring in to be formal teachers? Is it enough to just have them be smart people? Should it just be about choosing that? What is the selection and recruitment process that we should do here? And then, if teachers are born, why do we bother with having teacher education of any sort? That we can just throw them in and they'll instinctively know what to do. So of course what I'm talking about is the concept of a formal teacher as compared with the notion of the informal teaching that we all do, particularly where there are children involved. So it looks like a simplistic question, but I think it's quite complex to think about what we do. Yes?
Perhaps it makes us ask another question. What is a teacher then? What is teaching?
Indeed.
And is a teacher someone who gives the answers or someone who asks the questions to make someone else think of the answer themselves?
Indeed, thank you. Have you looked at my slides? Okay, but I ate the biscuit. But I think what you're raising are really key questions for us here. Thank you. What I'm going to do now is I've got 4 of these that I'd like to look at, just clips, just a minute or so, of movies over a 50-year period, and it just staggered me to realise that this film, To Sir With Love, was made more than 50 years ago. And I was delighted when some of the people arrived earlier that even some of the young ones here knew To Sir With Love and knew Sidney Poitier and had seen him as a bit of a fan. I think it's interesting to look at the media representation of what a teacher is. There's some interesting work. Do you get the TV show called Glee here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I find that a fairly interesting one to watch at the teachers. And I was going to include that. I thought, no, I'll just stick to a few fairly well-known movies over the years. So I'd like you to have a look at this one was particularly meaningful for me. I was saying that I had a couple of years of teaching in a secondary school in London, and I arrived there just after this movie had been released, and I truly thought that I had walked onto the film set. So as a young girl growing up in a country village in North Queensland, to walk into this London school and have the students dressed like this, using language that I had never heard in my life, was an extraordinary eye-opener for me, let me tell you. And I learned, I'm sure I learned far more from those children than I ever taught them. But we did have a wonderful 2 years together, and one of the things it taught me that I'll come back to again is that a lot of what we take for granted about teaching is completely arbitrary. It's completely the manifestation of groups of people working in governments, working in bureaucracies, working in legislation, who write a curriculum, who write a syllabus, who decide what the architecture of schools is to be like. And because I'd had very limited life experience when I started teaching, I had assumed that I knew exactly what a school looked like, what a teacher did, and what you learned at school. So moving to a different culture, to a different country, taught me that that's completely arbitrary. So we've got a lot of degrees of freedom if we want to explore it here. And I suspect that given who you are, the fact that you're in Singapore, most of you, many of you, will have known at least one other education system in which you've worked, so you'll have a sense of that. Can I just see hands up, those of you who've worked in at least 2 different education systems, schooling systems? Okay, so do you understand what, you know what I'm saying, don't you? That all of a sudden all this stuff is up for grabs. Wow, you know, you're not locked in anymore. So just have a look at this clip for what it tells us about some concepts of a teacher.
Please can I leave the room, Gav?
No, most of you girls help your mothers with the shopping.
So sorry, Mr. Thackeray. Proper draft in these parts, isn't it?
About multiplying. There are a few shillings per pound. Potter, must you do that?
Oh, I can't help it, sir. It's me desk.
Ah, poor old Pop.
Sit down. I'll speak with the caretaker about it after school.
Oh,
Hope I didn't miss nothing. Where was we, Pam, love? Oh, yeah, about shopping or something,
That's
wasn't
enough, Benham.
it? Well, I was only asking, Mr. Thackeray. Don't want to miss nothing now, do I?
Hey, Bert, he was just about to show us a new invaluable trick.
Oh, yeah, when you're shopping, boy.
I said that's enough.
Sit down. Do exercise 4, 5, and 6.
Very quietly.
Okay, so you all know what happens. He wins them over. They all fall in love with him. They sing, you know, what can I give you in return? You've taken me from crayons to perfume. And there's been this complete win over by the teacher. And I think when I thought about this, I thought that the representation that I'm seeing here is the teacher is this highly individualistic hero, really, who walks in. He contrasts, and it's he again, note, he contrasts with the students that he's teaching, and it's very much about the control, the crowd controller, the almost taming these wild children and bringing them into order. And the other thing that I wanted to comment on was this X factor, this notion that when I look back at To Sir With Love, when I was doing preparation for this, I thought this is quite a sexualised view of what the teacher is in the classroom as well, which I found a bit troubling. And I was thinking of one of the other films that I thought about. I don't know if you've seen Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer. Yes. And the same thing, I was deeply troubled by the way that that had become quite a sexualised relationship between the teacher and the students. And I was troubled by the element of that. And I can remember when I did my teacher training a long, long time ago, one of the lecturers saying to us, you have to leave yourself at the door when you walk